This is an ABP Live Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cracking Conversations on ABP Live Podcasts. I am your host Niharika Nanda, and every week we have a special guest on Cracking Conversations where we rack into their brains, we get an insight onto their experiences, and we like to share it with all of our audience so that they can also learn something from it. And today one such special guest who is with us is Mr. Aditya Gupta. Hello sir, welcome to Cracking Conversations.
Thank you, Niharika. Happy to be here.
Same here. It's all my pleasure to have this conversation with you. Now, for my audience, let me tell you a little about Mr. Gupta. Mr. Aditya Gupta has achieved a massive feat. He has been on the expedition of Everest, the Mount Everest, the one and the only, at the age of 50. Congratulations to you, sir, for achieving this feat.
Thank you very much.
It is honestly my honor because as, a below par, no sports anything person, it is honestly an honor to be sitting with someone who has not just climbed the Mount Everest but done so at the age of 50. So it is truly an honor for me.
Kind of you.
So being a journalist, I have to ask, कैसा महसूस कर रहे हैं आप ये करने के बाद?
देखिए, अच्छा तो महसूस नेचुरली करता ही आदमी, बट इट्स अ बिग लर्निंग. इसमें
Right.
बहुत सारी चीज़ें ऐसी होती हैं जो खुद को अपने बारे में, एवरेस्ट के बारे में तो आप समझ लेते हो, लेकिन आपकी जो यूनिक पर्सनालिटी है, which you explore in a very different dimension only when you expose yourself to certain circumstances.
Right.
So I think Everest expedition is something which tells you not only about Everest and other people, but also about yourself. Which
Right.
you have not experienced before and you probably will not experience again.
Again, true, very true. And how are you, sir? What's up? What's going on these days?
Everything is great. Life is very kind to me. I like to do a lot of good work. I like to take a lot of good travel. I do adventure travel. I am involved with so many productive endeavors that I can't be more thankful.
Right. And I think it also depends on interest because you have that knack, you have that interest, you have that, need for that adrenaline rush in you that you actually go for such adventurous things. So I think that also matters a lot in such
Yeah, definitely.
adventures.
See, there has to be an interest, but I
Right.
can definitely tell you that it's much more than just an adrenaline rush. Because adrenaline rush doesn't last you for 60 days.
True. Very rightly
Right.
said.
So it is a question of challenging yourself and experiencing those challenges. And then every challenge leaves you behind with a lot of stuff
Right.
in your psyche, in your body, in your life. So life is just a collection of experiences, right? So those experiences transform you.
Very rightly said.
And these kind of exceptional things, Mount Everest is obviously the one and only, as you said. So I think I'm very fortunate not only to have tried and achieved, but also to have returned safely. Right now is Everest climbing season. This year I think we've already lost more than 10 lives and quite a few are missing on the mountain. So as I said, there is enough to be grateful about.
Right. And talking about such incidents which are very prevalent at the moment also and in general also because it is a very tough expedition as is. So how did you prepare yourself mentally to go ahead and put yourself out there for such a thing?
So you are right, because physical preparation is a very cause and effect. It's very clear. Okay, you have to
Right.
do these things and those. So that way, in many senses, the physical preparation
There
is
are
the easy part.
like it's very instructed. You know, ये
Yes.
करोगे तो हो
ये
जाएगा.
करोगे हो जाएगा, exercise करोगे, खाना खाओगे, weight
Right.
manage करोगे, strength training करोगे, stamina build करोगे, so on and so forth. If you do what you're supposed to do, you get there.
You'll get the result.
The
Right.
mental preparation, however, is nearly a lifelong endeavor, and is not something कि आप गुट्टी पी के या 9 महीने में आप कुछ training कर लोगे. So
Right.
it is a collection of, as I said, experiences which make you push the envelope of your comfort, and then you observe how you do. You learn from it. You learn to deal with a challenge. You learn how to stay, I have to say, obdurately optimistic.
Right.
हो जाएगा,
हो जाएगा, कर लेंगे.
ठीक हो जाएगा, कुछ नहीं है, मतलब so many times you feel like it's the end of everything, now you're about to die. But there has to be that collection of your experiences which tells you that don't be overwhelmed by what immediately is, right in front of you.
Right.
When you crash it, and when you go step by step through it, it works out. So that optimism makes a big difference. So those are the kind of mental preparations. Other than that, as I said, you discover a lot about yourself.
Right.
So that is, I think the mental preparation is the main reason why they say that you should not be just, waking up and going to Everest. Because physically you can be very fit, you can be
Right.
whatever. But the mental part of the game is something which you can only grow into. You cannot be helicopter dropped into.
Right.
And you cannot do this without knowing what it is. And you
Exactly.
cannot know it without doing other things which are probably smaller in scope. But they expose you gradually to a higher degree of risk and discomfort. And then you figure out कि कर लेते हैं हम, हो जाता है, हम manage कर लेते हैं, इतना नहीं होता है,
So, what was the duration and preparation that sort of went into
So,
it?
one more
before
thing about the
you
mental
went there?
preparation, and I believe that this is an important part of not only climbing a mountain but in life.
anything in
you know.
life.
So there has to be preparation also for the rest of your family and friends. Okay, because they are also in many ways under a lot of duress.
Right.
Because you have gone, आप तो वहाँ पर है, but आपकी family तो इधर है.
Right.
So there is preparation that you have to do, which includes preparation for eventualities of not even coming back.
Right. Exactly.
From an expedition like Mount Everest. So yes, I went through those things also. So at in India we don't have a culture of writing wills and things like that, especially not at
Until
ages
you
of in the
really
40s.
exactly.
Yeah. So you start thinking about a will when you are in the 70s or 80s, and when doctor कहता है भाई लिखवा लो या कुछ या lawyers अगर कहते हैं.
Right.
So I had already done all of those things, because there is a preparation to accept the risks and be comfortable with it.
Right.
So
How was your family fine when you decided and when you
I
opened up
think
to them about it?
so basically I have been doing adventure activities all my life, and they're very well aware of this. I personally believe that life and death is a matter of destiny. It's a matter of in general I don't believe those things, but for certain things in life I think there is overwhelming evidence that one can always die on a road accident, in a plane crash,
exactly.
anywhere. So
it can be as simple
you
as
can't-
crossing the road outside your office
So you
or
can't
your
be
house.
like too scared of everything that can go wrong.
Right.
And that is one of the important things, that adventure in general and extreme adventure in particular teaches you to experience, and
And to be
therefore
fine
your
with.
belief is consolidated कि बहुत खतरा था, बहुत कुछ था, और कई लोग अनफॉर्चुनेटली एक्सपायर भी होते हैं या बहुत ग्रेवली इंजर्ड हो जाते हैं, बट आप नहीं हुए. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप में कोई बड़ी खूबी थी.
हाँ. Right.
The people who met with an accident or unfortunately died on the mountain were not less qualified or were not. So it is basically, there is something out there, there is something up there. So which
There is
doesn't mean
some
that we don't have to
energy
do our
that-
job. Yes.
Right.
So basically a lot of those kind of things. So I think my family in general is kind of prepared for it. But being prepared for something doesn't mean that you
Right.
will not
That
be,
you are
you will
actually
not be bothered
prepared.
by it.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're
So-
actually prepared for it to happen. Like to mentally
Exactly.
prepare yourself is one thing, but God forbid something of that sort happens, then that's a different ballgame altogether.
Then again, those things can happen to anyone anytime.
Anytime, exactly. And talking about things happening and things going wrong, did you face in all your expeditions, even before Everest, any deadly experience or any life-threatening experience during any of your expeditions?
So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
Because obviously if there is no risk, there is no adventure. So
Right.
if you are on an adventure expedition, you are assuming risk.
Right.
At the same time, you have to be responsible to know the fine line between bravery and stupidity.
Stupidity. Very
The
right.
fine line between how much you will commit. On the one hand, it requires a lot of commitment. On the other hand, it requires that wisdom in your mind to know when to cut your losses and turn around.
Right.
So it is very important that there is no degree of arrogance. There is no degree of
Stubborn.
yes.
Yeah.
So determination and tenacity of purpose have to be tempered with a common sense to see what is right in front of you,
Right,
what should
exactly.
be done, what
What
shouldn't be done.
in this
So that
given
is your
situation.
responsibility towards yourself and your loved ones to take that call. So therefore, many times in many expeditions, I've had to take a call to, return, be 200 meters under the goal, and then you say, no, we have to go back because it is,
God.
time is too late, the weather is becoming worse, and we have to, budget
Go
for 8
back
hours
and
of
so-
going back.
Right.
Or somebody else sometimes is not well, there are only 3 people, someone struggling. So, aap to theek hai, but it's a team endeavor. So, those things do happen. And then accidents happen, So, on Everest also, my oxygen ran out at 8,000
Oh my
meters,
God.
all of a sudden. My Sherpa left me on the way back. I came last 6 hours by myself.
Wow.
One of the nights, my whole of my leg went through the ice on the glacier and into the wet, into the water below, and so my whole of my left foot was soaked right into my boot.
Oh my
Middle of the
God.
night on Mount Everest in minus 25. So there are things that happen, and then when you keep on fighting that battle, you realize कि इतनी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम होती नहीं है जितनी एकदम से नजर आती है.
Because उस time पे you don't you don't have any solution.
Yes, so
you
the
just
only
get
thing is that
really
you keep
freaked
on
out
doing
about
what
it.
you need to do and not keep on thinking of what all can go wrong.
Go wrong, exactly.
And then you learn from those experiences that if you are not going to panic and if you are not going to be, mentally defeated, the physical aspect of it works out
Some
in
way or the
most
other.
situations.
Right.
It's mostly here that you lose first,
Right.
and then the rest of it follows.
True. So what did you do in that situation when your oxygen ran out?
So, there isn't much that you can do basically.
Exactly.
The first thing you have to do is that you don't have to panic. So, I was trying to walk and then I was finding it very difficult because I didn't realize कि हुआ क्या. So, चलते चलते suddenly मुझे लगा कि बहुत difficult हो गया है चलना. And then I looked up the pressure gauge and there was oxygen had
Right.
ran out. And my Sherpa had already gone because we were nearing camp and my Sherpa had left कि मैं जाके camp में चलता हूँ आप आ जाओ, and there is always a rope, and so you've been working at it for 40 days.
Right.
So eventually other people said no, you should wait, don't keep on going because you'll get exhausted, let somebody come and help you and all. So okay, I mean it's not the end of the world. But again, that is one of the lessons in my book, to expect to deal with the unexpected.
Right.
Now this is not a lesson which I went with when I went.
Exactly.
This is a lesson
That you
which I
learned
came
through
back with
experiences. Right.
to see that these couple of things happen, and because also there is, you see what happens on an expedition like Everest. Suppose कोई problem भी है, so अब आप क्या करोगे? आप कोई यहाँ पे complaint forum तो है नहीं, आप
Right.
कल दोबारा नहीं आओगे.
Exactly.
So when your back is against the wall and you know that there is no option but to fight the battle right now, otherwise you're dead.
Right. You're the fighter instinct.
So yes, because
sort of
it's a
start kicking
survival
in.
instinct.
Right.
So you have to survive, and it is obviously helpful if you are used to the fact that things go wrong and things suddenly look very, very hopeless.
Right.
And sometimes within the next 10 minutes, they also come back in order. So I think that is where the experience of learning from adventure comes in.
Right. And how long was the entire expedition, like to the base camp and then?
So Everest is a very long
To the
expedition. We typically have to plan a time budget of about 2 months.
Okay.
So it does take around 55 days, depending on weather conditions, depending on, if you got sick or something else. So for me, it was 52 days.
Okay.
When I left Delhi and when I came back to Delhi. And I think by and large, we had a smooth run. So, it could be a little bit more or sometimes
Right.
2-3 days lesser.
If 2
But
months is
yes.
the average, I think it went.
Yeah,
pretty
see, average
good.
now is between, let's say, between 7 and 8 weeks.
So
is
you
what
pretty
we
much
can-
completed
yes,
it
yes,
within that.
We were kind of
Right.
on schedule.
And what is the mode of communication? Because I'm sure that cell phones.
So cell phones,
do they work?
well,
Do they
Nepal
not?
Telecom cell phones do work intermittently up to base camp.
Okay.
Beyond that, they don't. So satellite phones.
Right.
And base camp also has a satellite connection to give you Wi-Fi, which
Okay.
is, for which they charge an arm and a leg, but they do have it.
Right.
And it works also intermittently. By and large, with your family, you are able to
Stay in touch
send a message
for the
and
bare
later
minimum
on,
at
yes.
least.
because
Right.
it's also a question of battery, and then if you want to recharge, then you carry solar panel. I mean, how much
Right.
can you carry?
Exactly.
So
Because
basically,
you cannot
yeah.
carry a lot
No, you can't.
because you are already carrying yourself
That's right.
against the gravity. So let alone just carrying yourself, you also have to carry 10 things along with it.
Yeah.
And amongst your previous expeditions like Kilimanjaro and all the others, which one did you feel was the most enjoyable one? The one that you really, that really made you feel that okay, this is something nice that I'm doing.
Look, I think I enjoy all my trips in deep in nature. I would say the Mongolia expedition we did a horseback expedition in Mongolia where we
Okay.
rode through the mountains for 10 days on horses,
Okay.
which was beautiful. I did a Kamchatka expedition, which is the southern tip of the Kamchatka Peninsula. So Kamchatka is further east of Siberia in
Okay.
Russian territory. So these are very, very pure, very unspoiled, pieces of wilderness on Mother Earth where you really see beauty which is completely incomparable to anything else that we would normally be able to see. So I think that is something which really drives me, attracts me, inspires me. Mount Everest, of course, it's unfair to compare Mount Everest to anything else.
Right.
So really, it's a completely different category of expeditions.
Peaks, right.
But other than that, beauty is everywhere. Honestly.
Right. And like once you were there, you reached the summit. How was that feeling? That the satisfaction that okay, wow, I've done this, because we all know what is Mount Everest. Like it is a huge deal. How was that feeling?
You're right. So it's a mix of feelings. When you were there at that moment, that feeling actually comes in waves at different stages of when you were there. So when I personally just reached and finally so basically when you are just about, let's say, 50-60 steps away, the last part is a smoother sort of an accent, so you can really see it and you can see that it's coming in,
Right.
so you can pretty much about half an hour before
Right.
reaching
You are
actually
sort of preparing
you
yourself
kind of
for
know
that
that now
moment.
I am pretty much there, because internally you are feeling okay and it's just
Exactly.
question of putting one step ahead of the other. So the first thing I did was to look up in the sky and
Right.
because that is, by that time you realize that how much something or someone up there is protecting you. It is not only your own merits that you are going
Right.
on. बहुत सारे जो लोग बहुत पीछे स्ट्रगल भी कर रहे थे वो आपसे कम नहीं थे,
नहीं थे.
लेकिन किसी तरह से आपको कोई ना कोई तो जाने दे रहा है आगे. So
There is
that
some
sense
luck
of
factor. There is some
there
energy
is
that is
absolutely
keeping
there.
you.
It's a matter of destiny. It's a matter
Right.
of luck. It is obviously also a matter of what you are doing. I'll not take that away.
No, definitely.
But that is not everything.
Right.
So anybody who says I conquered, there is this kind of phrase which is used, conquering of Mount Everest. This is all nonsense. Nobody conquers anything. You are
Right.
allowed to, by the mountain lets you climb.
Right.
And that is very obvious when you are in these kind of expeditions. If you can't see it, then it's a tragic lack of perception on your own part. So that is the first part. Then you get very excited. I'm a photographer, so you get very excited.
Okay.
And when we reached, it was a clear morning. So till about, and typically you're not supposed to stay there more than 10, 12, 15 minutes max.
Okay.
I stayed there for about 38 minutes.
Wow.
Based on my first and last photo and the timestamp that I saw later, because obviously
Right.
I was a little greedy about taking pictures
Right,
and videos
exactly.
and things. And then the weather from the Tibetan side, clouds were coming in and it was clear that it's another 20 minutes and it will be all. And then it was blizzard conditions. So fortunately, when we were right at the summit, it was a clear blue. And you can literally see, the planet.
Right.
So that consumes you. And then after 20-25 minutes, when you know that it's time to go back, there is something knocking in your head that the more dangerous
Right.
part starts now.
Right.
Because one, you've seen everything. Two, you are aware that most of the accidents and deaths actually occur on the way back.
Okay.
Right?
That I was not aware of, actually.
No, because you are exhausted, because the conditions are harder. Your ability to deal with those conditions is debilitated because you've been climbing through whole night.
this
Like
time.
I left last camp at 6:30 at night. I reached the summit at 7:30 in the morning. So you're climbing 13 hours, and then you have to go
that
back
too entirely during the night.
entirely during the night at minus 30, minus 35 temperatures. And an altitude gain of nearly 3,000 feet.
Right.
From the last camp to the summit. So those things obviously take your energy away, and the lack of oxygen, obviously compromises your ability to make decisions.
Right.
तो वो भी रिस्क तो होता ही है, तो आपको मालूम है कि ये रिस्क है, सो देन यू से ओके अभी so you are not really done. So when you reach the summit, you're not really done. You are done only when you reach
back to the base camp and done with the whole
thing. So that feeling of complete achievement and relief, I mean, okay, achievement to the extent that you reached.
Right. But relief is only when you're done.
Yes. And your family and your loved ones actually are most bothered about your coming back and not so much about whether
about the fact that you achieved it or not.
not.
And that is something actually very different from my perception, and I think in the general perception also, because even if we take a flight of stairs as the example, you always think that the climb is the difficult part and the coming down is not, but you really gave a different insight into the whole thing.
On Everest, it is
the other
both sides. Yeah, it's both sides. There are different kinds of difficulty, but the risks on the going back sides are higher.
Right. Talking about food, what kind of food is actually available on during the entire expedition?
So there are two main kitchens, which is one on base camp, which is a pretty well stocked kitchen. The other one is on advanced base camp, which is basically camp 2. Besides of these two camps, especially anything above camp 2, camp 3, camp 4, is very limited. Sort of, have a little stove. They take some cooked stuff. They heat up typically only a bowl of soup, or because as you go higher on altitudes, you don't have an appetite. Plus, at the last stages, these last 3-4 days of these climbs, there is obviously a lack of sleep. There is some anxiety. There are so many things that are going in your mind. So your capacity to eat is very limited.
Right.
Although you should be eating. So there is a lot of stuff like nuts, chocolates. I carried khajur from myself. So there are these things. There is also these energy gels which come for, which are used by long distance runners. I did not know of it. वहाँ पे जाके मैंने मुझे जो कुछ लोग अमेरिका वगैरह से आए थे. So there's almost like a small tube of toothpaste.
Okay.
Which is basically 100 calories.
Okay.
So as you're going, so in very long distance ultra marathon, there is a schedule to that. Right. Every 1 hour, you kind of consume one tube and you keep going. So there is some sort of a pocket food that you have to carry. Obviously, you can't have warm food and you don't have anything else. So this is the last part. But base camp mein to badhiya. Base camp mein to, they actually cook very good food because they're almost trying to get you to put on some weight.
Acha.
So
why
puri
so?
aloo bhi banta, because there will be a lot of weight loss as you keep going up, right? So put on weight, not literally put on weight, but somehow, sort of be in, not only in a good physical condition, but also in a good mood. So obviously, who doesn't like good food? So actually, dinner में खूब कभी पूरी भी बन रहा है, कभी छोले भटूरे भी बन रहा है, कभी राजमा चावल भी बन रहा है. So base camp kitchen is pretty solid.
Right.
And, but obviously, as you go above, you have to get back into the real adventure mode.
Right. Makes more sense.
And kudos to people, the cooks and the Sherpas who work in the kitchen. Typically we leave base camp at night. 1:30, 2 o'clock we start. So उस टाइम में उठ के कोई रात में -25 टेम्परेचर हो रहा है, वो तो कुक कर रहे हैं आपके. And I was surprised to see these people have they have their sleeves like this and they're making omelets for you and somebody gets you tea in the camp. So there is hard work that the crew actually is doing there.
Puts in, exactly. And in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that there are things that you get to know about yourself while you are on such adventures. So what did you discover about yourself as a person during your expedition?
Look, I don't think I have a list of things that I discovered, but I think there is a general awareness. And I think broadly, if I had to say one thing, is that you realize that there is no limit to what you can endure and what you can achieve.
Right.
So sometimes we get very easily discouraged because something looks daunting and intimidating. And that is one of the lessons that I have spoken of in my book, that, a scale should not scare you. But again, this is easier said than done. But when you experience it firsthand, and then when you experience the fact that, when you take one step at a time, actually things work out eventually. You just have to keep going at it. So the ability to stick to that task in the eyes of danger, discouragement, difficulty is the biggest thing that you learn, right? And obviously, personally, on a more base level, I learned that I can deal well with altitude.
Okay.
I could sleep and eat well even at camp 4. People are not able to eat or sleep even beyond camp 2.
Okay.
But I was relatively quite okay to eat. I could even ask for another helping.
Okay.
And most people not even able to finish one, and they already giving you just थोड़ा सा सूप दे दिया उसमें, जो कोई कुछ खाता ही नहीं है. मैं बोल रहा हूँ यार और दे दो. So they're quite surprised. So I think some of those things which you learn.
And adventures like these, such life-changing things, they give you perspective about life in general as well.
Yes.
And how difficulties and how rough patches and tough things that you go through are similar to such things. So, what kind of a perspective did you get about life in general as we talk about expeditions like the Everest?
So one of the biggest things I think, if I had to see in the bigger picture, is what is an adventure? It's a risky endeavor. So your ability to deal with risks is a very important feature of everybody's life.
Right.
And risk doesn't have to be all the time about getting
Right.
killed. So
Life
risk is
endangering
everything.
is not
If I'm
the
a business person, it is about managing risks.
Right.
Whether it's financial, everything is a calculation of how much risk and how much return, right? So the ability to deal with risk, and then when you realize very clearly that you divide risks into two parts, the known risks and the unknown risks. So you deal with the known risk by this lesson which I called in my book called Making Friends with Fear. So it sounds counterintuitive, like how do you become friends with fears? The idea is that you become comfortable with the fact that there are things to be scared of and that they can be dealt with if you first of all put them in the box of saying that, okay, I am happy to sit next to you.
Right.
I know that there is a problem, but I will prepare for it. So there is that part of the risk management. And then there is the risk which is unknown risk, the stuff like oxygen khatam ho gaya, pair gir gaya, Sherpa chale gaya. So all of those things you can't plan for really, right? So these are the unknown unknowns. And that part is to say that you have to expect that something unknown or unexpected will happen.
Right.
You cannot say what exactly will happen, but you should know that कुछ ना कुछ तो होता रहेगा.
Right.
But once you have become comfortable with that thought, then there is an attitudinal shift in how you deal with problems.
Exactly, because then you start dealing with it in the form that ठीक है, जो
In
भी
a very
problem
matter
आएगी,
of fact, कि हाँ
कर
ठीक है यार,
लेंगे,
हो रहा है,
हो
मतलब ये तो
जाएगा.
होना ही था ना. अब आप
Exactly.
एवरेस्ट पे आए हो, गार्डन में घूमने तो नहीं आए ना, कुछ ना कुछ तो होगा ना.
बिल्कुल होगा.
अगर कुछ भी नहीं होता तो फिर मतलब ऐसी क्या बात थी? फिर एवरेस्ट पे चढ़ने से कोई
राइट, फिर तो और कोई चढ़ लेता, फिर उसमें ऐसी यूनिक चीज क्या थी?
एग्जैक्टली. सो जिसको बोलते हैं कि भाई अगर किसी चीज की तारीफ है तो कोई बात थी ना उसमें.
बिल्कुल.
सो यू हैव टू एक्सेप्ट दोस थिंग्स and take it a package deal.
Right. And so to do it at your age of 50 years of age, do you think that you faced certain challenges which probably a young aspirant who wishes to climb the Everest might not?
Actually it's quite the opposite.
Okay.
I'll tell you why I say so. Because the physical aspect of climbing Everest is one part, but the main battle is the mental aspect.
Right.
So in that sense, I think the older chaps are a little bit more mature.
Right.
So as long as you have qualifying marks physically,
Right.
but you have better marks here,
That is
I
what
think you are
matters
better
more.
suited for the match.
Right.
Because physically तो ठीक है, but the thing is वहाँ पे physically is one thing, but how you deal with it is
everything
not so much only physical.
More mental. for
More
sure.
mental. So physically, that's what I felt, and I saw that also with my own eyes. But yeah, of course, I mean, how your mental state will also be governed by your physical state. So you have to prepare. And I think younger people have an inaccurate idea about how old 50 is. 50 is not that old. Ask somebody who's 50 or ask
Right.
somebody who's 70. They'll tell you,
There
50
is
तो
a
यार young है,
बहुत
अभी तो तुम
difference
बच्चे
है.
हो.
Exactly.
Right? So I think when you are 25, you feel 50 is old because your dad is 50.
Right. I was about to say that.
But when you ask your grandfather, you say, "रे तो बच्चे हैं, अभी तुमने देखा ही क्या है?
Right.
50 साल का हो गया लेकिन तुमने देखा
देखा ही
ही
क्या
क्या है?"
है.
So it
Also,
is
that is a very
it's very
Indian
much
parent
here.
instinct also.
Yeah, it is a parental instinct, but it's also in general also. Everybody feels that, like every alumni thinks that now my institution is gone to crap.
That is true.
When I was in
have
school, it
actually
was
felt it with each and every institution that I've been to.
Exactly. So and everybody before you felt the same, and
Probably.
everybody after you will feel the same.
Same, exactly.
So I would not say age is just a number, but on Everest specifically, 50, 60 years is not so bad.
Okay. That is, a door that opens up for all the 50, 60-year-olds who have dreamt of it that way. You should go ahead
of course
with
you
it.
need to do your job for it. So my
Right.
first lesson says passion plus preparation. So you can't just dream about it, you have to do something about it.
Right.
And what you do is obviously defined by what sacrifice you're willing to put in.
Right.
So preparation is the result of those sacrifices, and age is not really the filter there.
And so, can you tell us a little about your book, 7 Lessons from Everest?
I think I've been talking about it. The
Right.
reason that book came about, partly thanks to the lockdowns that were happening immediately after me, there was time. And
So, you had taken the expedition before
2019.
Okay,
Yes.
right.
So 2 days ago was my 4th anniversary of actually submitting Everest.
Wow, that is amazing.
So on 22nd of May 2019, 7:30 in the morning is when I reached. The book came about because I wanted to obviously, preserve my memories. I was doing just a photo book. Then I realized that there is more to it than just photographs of Everest. There is enough photos and videos.
Right.
कोई ऐसी खास बात नहीं है कि photos भी हैं.
I think it's
So-
the personal experiences that matter.
Exactly.
Matter more.
And then the question became that, okay, what good is it to somebody else that you climbed Everest? In many ways, mountaineering is a very personal and a very selfish sort of sport. And most sports are very personal, but mountaineering even more so. Because it's not a spectator sport.
Right.
You don't sell
You only do it
tickets
for
to go and
yourself.
watch mountaineering.
Right.
Typically you have to.
Although I think they should. It is a very, very adventurous thing to do.
It's very slow. It's very slow for that. You can't be watching for 45
Right. We
days.
can probably create a hyperlapse
So
of the whole process.
I think it is almost like that. वो कौन सा Big Brother क्या है? Which is Big
The
Boss.
Big Boss.
Yes. So I think if there was a Big Boss,
For
sort of a
mountaineers,
concept
this-
of mountaineering, and
exactly.
I've just let somebody have a very brilliant idea. If somebody's taking it, please give me a cut.
We can do
Because-
this.
because
Royalty
doing-
यहाँ आनी चाहिए.
Because the Big Boss on Mount Everest would be something exceptional.
Right,
And that will
exactly.
really give you a lot of insight.
You are the big boss of Mount Everest, I would say. Every
Well, I'm
mountain
definitely
there
not. But so the book, so then I started writing these things, and there was time because we were all locked down, and I was doing these talks and keynote addresses and some of those things, and we were sharing what I learned. I wrote down first. It started by writing 5 lessons, and then some of the questions kept coming in the first few talks. So then I added 2 more. And then the motivation to actually write a book, it's a pretty solid, big coffee table book. It took me an unimaginable number of hours to actually finish it. So then I made it into an idea about raising money for CRY, for a charity,
Okay.
because I knew कि कुछ इतना commercial interest मेरा उसमें था नहीं और ऐसा कोई बिकने वाली चीज़ भी नहीं है. बहुत books होती हैं Everest पे. But raising money for CRY became a motivation, and we did raise about 75 odd lakhs for that charity through that
that is
book,
really
because
something.
the book was given by people donating to CRY, and we would ship the books for free.
Okay.
So
right.
people used it for gifting, my friends in the corporate world, or even individuals. So that became very satisfying, and it gave a purpose to the whole thing. And then when you have a purpose, you are willing to
Do
take
more
a
and
lot
more,
more
as much as
grind.
possible.
You're taking a lot more grind.
Right. Congratulations on that, because that is, again, as you said, it's a very personal thing.
Yep.
So a lot of people might actually want to learn from it, but before our conversation started, you also mentioned a very important thing, that a lot of people might simply not be that into it because they're not into
They're
the
not
sport. They're
interested
not
trying to climb Mount Everest.
Right, but
And
at
Mount
the same
Everest
time-
is just an example of a challenge.
Exactly, but to put a purpose to it, something that brings about a change is, I think, matters a lot more. So kudos to you for that as well.
Thank you so much, Niharika.
And the last question of the interview has to be, for any noob mountaineer out there, what are your tips that they should follow if they want to one day reach the summit of Everest?
See, I'll tell you, I am not sure if I am qualified to give tips, but I
You
can
very
share
much
with you.
are, sir.
Because there are so many bigger experts in mountaineering than I will ever be. But I can share with you what has worked for me and what I think will work for a lot of people.
Right.
I think the first thing is to be recognize the fact that you got to be humble in face of the mountain, and it is something which is letting you climb.
Right.
Because arrogance can be your biggest enemy on an expedition like this. The other thing is that there are no shortcuts to preparation here. there is nothing that you can do in the last 2 weeks or say कि अच्छा चलो चलते हैं, because it's a lot of capacity building.
Right. It's not like an exam एक रात पहले पढ़ के
No, you
नहीं
can't.
होगा.
You can't. And also very importantly, I think, and sometimes this is a mistake that happens very commonly, that you have to, expand that scope of your adventures a little step by step.
Okay.
I would say don't just jump into it because there is a rush. Life is, as I said, 50 years is not that old. So if you're already interested when you are 25, take some time, go through the smaller expeditions, understand about how it works, understand about how you feel on 6,000 meters, 7,000 meters. Because a lot of the cause of fatalities on Everest is the fact that your body is physiologically extremely challenged on altitude, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
It's almost like somebody
is the
feels
way it
cold.
is.
Yes, yeah. मिर्ची लगता है आपको तो लगता है. It's not because you are weak कि आपको मिर्ची लगता है.
It is just the
But
way
if your
things
altitude is, so some of those things have to be there. So you have to go step by step. It's not a rushed thing. It is not a showmanship sort of sport. Okay, if you've done something worthwhile, people are impressed and that's fine. But it has to be very clear as to why you are doing this, and it should be also genuinely enjoyable, that you will endure those conditions for an extended period of time.
Right. Right.
So Everest or any long expedition like 1 month, 6 weeks, 4 weeks is not कि आपने 2-4 दिन चलो बर्दाश्त कर लेंगे.
Right.
बर्दाश्त नहीं करना है, enjoy करना
Enjoy
है.
करना है. Right.
Whether or not you enjoy that thing,
Matters the most.
you will have to discover about yourself. Because bearing something for 2-3 days is different.
Is different.
2-3 weeks is different, and then every other day after that time limit is an exponential degree of difficulty.
Right.
It's not a linear relationship anymore.
Right.
So आज अगर वो 5 किलो का वेट है आपके सर पे, तो कल सुबह वो 10 किलो का फील होगा और परसों 20 किलो का फील होगा. It will not be 5, 6, 7.
Right.
So you have
or
to prepare
linear
for
in
that.
the sense that okay, आज 5 है तो कल भी 5 होगा. It'll weigh on you.
Yes. So I think those kind of things matter a lot when you're preparing.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for
Thank you,
coming to this
Niharika.
conversation, because it was truly enlightening for me also, because I am not a kind of person who has, a lot of knowledge on mountaineering as is, along with sports as well. But to talk to you about this and to gain an insight about how it really reflects on the kind of choices you make in your life, not just in a sports or an adventure format. But still, how it can really help you learn is something that is altogether a different ballgame, and you helped me do that. So thank you for doing that.
Very sweet of you. Thank you. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much, sir. And keep listening to Cracking Conversations on ABP Live Podcasts.